Hi Gravesy, thank you so much for taking the time to answer some of my questions.
No problem.
In Play On, it mentions that you stopped playing once you turned 12 and didn't start playing again until you were old enough to play in a women's team. I can't imagine not playing football, and so I know that would have been really hard. Is that what made you so passionate in developing female pathways?
Oh, I think it probably started a bit before that. My dad was the president of a football club, and Mum worked in the canteen, all the usual roles that people played. So I was around a footy club pretty much from the day I was born. Member of Carlton Footy Club since I was 6, and the AFL in those days had membership. So always part of it. And I guess my passion for making sure that you guys don't miss out like we did was, probably the tears that I had when I was 12 and told that I couldn't play anymore because I was 12 and can't play with the boys any longer. So a little bit of both.
Okay, cool. What got you interested in football in the first place, and what has your pathway been?
Yeah, well, obviously, as I said, the family connection was really important, and the pathway I played, from under 8s through to under 12s, and then as soon as I turned 12, that was the end of it. So I went and played every other sport imaginable, and being a country kid, so my hometown only had 1,200 people, so there was plenty of different sports to play. So I just went and did that, and then when I moved to Melbourne as a 17-year-old after high school, I found the Women's League, so I started playing women's footy when I moved to Melbourne for university, so that was sort of it. Played some state footy for Victoria and was involved in coaching, and I was the president of the Darebin Women's Sports Club, which have been a fairly successful team over the other side of the ditch. We've obviously had lots to do with many of the superstars. So that's really been my pathway. And then obviously once I finished playing, I got into coaching and have been coaching ever since.
Okay, cool. How did you get involved at Swan Districts?
So I came over to WA in 2006 and I was working with the AFL in Victoria over there and came over to WA and they found me over here and the Western Australian Footy Commission offered me a job as a district manager of the Swans district. So ironically I was coaching the East Fremantle women working at Swans one of my first roles for the footy club they said, well, we want to get a women's team here. So in that very first year I spoke to some of the more senior girls around this region and they said Southern Thunder was a team that was sort of struggling a bit, but they were in our zone. So I went and spoke to the girls there and we started up the Swan Districts footy team in 2007. So that's how... So I worked for the Footy Commission but was based here at Swans. And then within 18 months, Swan Districts Football Club themselves employed me and I headed up started up the V Swans program. So that's how it all happened.
That's awesome. You've worked in Victoria and WA and have obviously been instrumental in developing female football. Is there a difference in pathways between states?
Oh, yeah, as each has evolved. Western Australia, not being a big state and didn't have a huge amount of teams back in, I guess, the days when Victoria was still quite large. In saying that, when I started in the Women's Football League in Victoria, there was only 4 teams. Now there's hundreds of teams. So, so both states have evolved, considerably. But I guess when I started, it was Victoria and South Australia that were the strongest. Then was Western Australia and then Queensland and New South Wales, ACT all started to come in sort of in that first 6 or 7 years that I was playing. So they are all a bit different and they're all at different stages of their development. But, Queensland's had a really good program. When they started not with a women's league run by volunteers, but, Queensland AFL started them up. So they evolved quickly and sort of surpassed many of the other states in terms of their development. Probably just didn't have the critical mass of girls to play like Victoria did. So Vic's always been the strongest, but in terms of development, they've all, balanced out differently as they've evolved through whether they've been set up by the AFL or been set up by, volunteer women, which was obviously how it was set up in the 80s by, women as volunteers setting it up rather than the men sort of backing them.
Yeah, okay, cool. What do you think your greatest achievements have been through what you have done?
I think probably in Victoria was setting up the youth girls, the community youth girls comp, which, as I said, was difficult to start from scratch. But we got a good program, and there's literally, I think there's something like 100 or 200 teams in that now. So in 2004, which doesn't seem that long ago when we set it up, was only 5 teams, and as I said, just over a decade after, there are literally hundreds of teams. So that's probably the greatest achievement for me in terms of game development. In terms of personal outcomes, I guess, last year with the 3 premierships, it's typical, isn't it? The 3 premierships was probably a highlight for us here at Swans, and really was where, can't find it, was really where I guess everything we wanted to do, evolved, for all 3 teams to win, so which means that we had heaps of depth and that we were going in the right direction, and plenty of support and backers and financially sound, and plenty of parents sharing in the philosophy. So it's probably one at each end of I guess my career, both in coaching and work.
Have there been any disappointments?
2010 we lost the grand final, the first one I coached as Swan District's coach, and we lost the grand final by a point after being undefeated all year. So that one sort of hurt, in terms of a coaching and personal thing, and I think there's only a few girls left from that particular team still playing, and I think we all still discuss that. I guess the other disappointment is probably not being able to get an AFLW coaching gig thus far, but, I'll keep working on that and take on the feedback and get there eventually. So, so they're probably the 2 that stand out the most.
It's great we have AFLW, but what do you see as the main challenges going forward?
With AFLW? Yeah. Listen, I think the challenges will be to make sure that we keep the game something that everyone wants to watch. The first year everyone was pretty excited. The second year, people are sort of like, well, has it evolved, hasn't evolved? Us that know it in women's footy know that it's evolved considerably from year 1 to year 2. So they've got to keep making sure that we keep improving and that the game is something that people want to watch on TV. It's great for more participants, but we want to make sure that the TV fan wants to watch it, because that's where, the money comes in to pay for all the things that we get. So it's really important, both sides of the game.
Is there anything the wider community could be doing more of to support female football?
No, I think it's good now. I mean, with AFLW, and you would know, Em, now that we talk about girls footy, even a few years ago, people would be like, well, I didn't even know there was girls footy. Now everyone knows there's girls footy. So when you talk about it, whether it be out and about or at a party or new people that you meet, and anywhere in Australia, most people are like, oh yeah, we've seen a bit of that, and you can have a conversation about it, whereas it wasn't that long ago that no one knew except the ones that were playing, if you know what I mean. So so it's been good.
How would you describe your coaching style?
Oh, wow. How would you describe my coaching style? I guess it's a fairly unique coaching style. I like to have a bit of a joke and make sure that it's still fun, but I'm pretty serious about getting the outcomes that we want. So there's the Gravesy spray is a bit of a bit of a legendary fact, although everyone thinks it's funnier now than it used to be. So it used to make people cry, now everyone just giggles. So I guess you guys understand me better. So that's it. But for me, it's really coaching the whole person, making sure I know what's happening in their background, that I understand what's happening in their family, what's happening with them emotionally, because I think you can get more out of your players if you invest time in them personally. So that's sort of more, I guess, my strength, is making sure that we're all close, So I think, you guys will, want to go out there and, put on the jumper, not just for yourselves and your team, but for your coach and for the club. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. I read in Play On that you coached the inaugural international rules team that travelled to Cork Island in 2006. What was it like coaching that team? Was it different to coaching Swan District's teams opposed to Was it
I know
different?
it wasn't different. Yeah, obviously there was challenges, and women's footy, again was in an evolution sort of midway through rather than where it is now. So, there were some challenges in terms of the women's international rules had different rules, so we weren't allowed to tackle, which made it very hard to stop the Irish. And Cora Staunton, who's playing for GWS, I mean, we're talking this was 12 years ago, so imagine how good she was 12 years ago. So I think she single-handedly just about beat us, So, it was very different. Ireland had 400,000 people, girls playing Gaelic football in those days, and we had 100,000. Now we've got 400,000 and they've got 300,000. So we've been able to grow really quickly. So, taking people to the other side of the country, or the other side of the world, I should say, is a real challenge. But the rule changes were difficult for that. And it was on TV, it was live around Ireland, so there was a lot of different pressures. So it was very different. Yes, if I had my time again, I'd probably do it very differently. But at that time, in terms of where women's footy was, it was a pretty good effort.
Yeah. Moana Hope in her book calls you a straight shooter and says that can get you offside with the game's hierarchy. Do you think that's true?
Oh, absolutely. So Mo said it best as well. As I said, working in the game for such a long time, sometimes it works in your benefit, in your benefit to know everyone in the game, and sometimes it works against you. So, and I've worked in the game, not just as a coach, but obviously as an administrator, and that can annoy people sometimes because you have to make hard calls, and sometimes people have got very long memories when you have to make hard calls in terms of the business itself. So it's been a challenge. Yeah, I've just done that. Sorry, excuse me.
Sorry.
I just put them all together on the board. There you go. Be careful, not everyone's there, so she just needs to let me know.
Okay.
I wouldn't be flashing it around, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
Cheers. Sorry, blogger. Interruption by the assistant coaches. So I think, Mo said it right, and Mo was like that as well as a young player. She didn't necessarily conform to what everyone thought a footballer should look like or a female should look like. So, she copped some of that as well. So I guess we had some likenesses there. I was staunch at what I wanted to achieve, and same with her. So Mo probably said it right. And Mo and I used to look after Mo as a young teenager as well. So, she's probably heard me many times, losing it at what was frustrating me about women's footy and game development and how seriously AFL was taking it at that time, So, so it was an interesting scenario, and I guess I'm still probably paying for some of those things now in terms of, opportunities at AFLW level. So, to be honest, that's just how it rolls. Yeah. So, we take the feedback on and we keep evolving.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about AFLW is that not all the players have a football background. Do you think this will change when female football becomes more established?
Yeah, I think, within 5 years we'll start to see the non-football athletes start to waver, because at the moment they're getting critical mass in, they're making sure they're getting elite, because we haven't got a lot of, professional, well, it's only been, 2 years of professional football or semi-professional. So to bring in girls from other sports has been part of that evolution. But, in 5 years' time, as the kids are evolving, they're just going to be, those players are going to be smarter and fitter and faster and stronger. And so, therefore, they'll get picked. The Chloe Malloys of this world are passionate footy people. Even though she came from another sport, she didn't really. She just didn't have an opportunity in footy before this point. Yeah. You know what I mean? So... A lot of, and it's the same even with Erin Phillips. If footy had been professional when she started basketball, she probably would have picked footy. Yeah. Same with Braz, with Ash Brazel. They chose other sports because footy wasn't, didn't have a pathway internationally. They couldn't get paid, all those sorts of things. So I think we'll see that change as AFLW evolves, a little bit more money, more professional, and obviously time.
Yeah. Okay. This is the last question.
Mm-hmm.
What's your dream in terms of women's football?
For me personally, is obviously to coach at AFLW level and ultimately be a head coach at AFLW level. In terms of game development, my passion for it is to make sure that everyone believes in the game as much as I do. that it's great to watch, that they have got fantastic skills. It's never going to be like the men because we're not as big and strong and all the rest of it, and we're, probably won't happen in my lifetime where girls are going to get paid $500,000 to play footy, but it will happen. So really I just hope that continues to grow.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gravesy, for taking the time to answer my questions. I really appreciate it.
Any time, Em. Thank you, and sorry for my late